Hello, everyone. My name is Pamela Sorensen, and I'm the founder and president of High Frequency Consulting, where we make connections that matter to your business and your organization. We're proud to be the sponsor of this panel, which features activist authors Philippe Cousteau Jr. and Ken Harvey, and it's being moderated by Leigh Tivol of the Potter's House. So we're excited to be here. We're excited to support 1455 and the 2021 Summerfest. Enjoy.
All right. Great, let's get started. I would like to welcome everybody to this session. We're thrilled to have you all watching today for this conversation entitled Inspiring Young Minds for Good and Social Change, How Storytelling Can Mold and Motivate Children and Young Adults to Take Action and Do Good in the World. It's a mouthful, but it's a really important mouthful. We are so happy that you all are with us today as part of the 1455 Summer Festival, hosted by 1455 Literary Arts. My name is Leigh Tivol, and I'm the director of the Potter's House, which is a nonprofit bookstore, cafe, and event space in the Adams Morgan neighborhood of Washington, D.C. We have been rooted in this community since 1960, really leaning into our values around radical hospitality and welcome to everyone in our community. And over the past couple of years, we have created this lovely partnership with our friends at 1455 Literary Arts. So I'm especially excited to get to be part of this conversation today. So just to kind of frame out the conversation and before we turn to our guests, the theme of this year's Summer Festival is celebrating the art of storytelling. And we all have stories to tell. And telling stories to children and young people is particularly special and powerful. I was reflecting that stories are one of the most elemental, fundamental ways of connecting and teaching and learning. As humans, we are wired to hear and receive and learn from stories. When somebody says, "Let me tell you a story," suddenly the room gets quiet. We lean forward, we're listening, we're absorbing, we're learning. And sometimes that story is more than the sum of the words on the page. Sometimes there are deeper lessons, deeper intentions at play. And that is what we're going to talk about today with these two incredible authors, activists, and storytellers for change. So it is my great honor and delight to be joined today by Philippe Cousteau and by Ken Harvey, two leaders in the public eye who are using their platforms to educate and inspire young people for good. So I'll introduce them briefly. Philippe Cousteau is a multi-Emmy nominated TV host, author, speaker, and social entrepreneur. He's hosted many TV programs for Discovery, BBC, CNN, the Travel Channel, and more. He is currently the host of the syndicated TV show Exploration Awesome Planet. And he's also the award-winning author of several books, including Follow the Moon Home, Going Blue, and Make a Splash. And his new book series, The Endangereds, which we'll talk about today, launched in fall of 2020. It's a great book. I will tell you, my kid has really enjoyed it. Philippe is also one of the founders of Earth Echo International, which is an environmental education organization dedicated to inspiring youth to take action for a sustainable planet. They have programs around the globe and are touching and engaging hundreds of thousands of young people every year. We're also joined by Ken Harvey. He is currently the executive director for the nonprofit Touching Heart, which teaches young people to be compassionate leaders. What an important and essential mission. You probably also know Ken from his time as a former NFL football player, 4-time Pro Bowl selection, and 5-time nominee for the NFL Hall of Fame. I will tell you that there are people in my cafe bookstore right now who are super excited that I'm talking to you, Ken. Ken has written for the Washington Post. He's published several novels for adults, including Alone and Xavier, as well as some screenplays. And of particular interest for today's conversation, Ken has also published numerous kids' books with a social justice and awareness focus, including The Leftover Games, When Chocolate Milk Moved In, and The Fridge Games. He also wrote a book in 2019 called Come Find Me that was illustrated by actor and former teammate Terry Crews. So Ken, Philippe, thank you both so much for coming together for this conversation, and let's dive in.
Thanks for having us, Leigh. I'm really, really excited.
And I'm supposed to be serious, but thank you very much. I've always wanted to do it. I'm sorry.
There you go.
Namaste.
You got it. There we go. All right, so let's dive into this conversation. So I'm just going to pose this first question. When you each first set out on this path of storytelling for social change, why did you decide that this was a platform that you wanted to pursue? What were the messages and the ideas that you were hoping to get into the heads of young people? And what was the change that you had hoped to see? And I will let you all pick who wants to jump in first. Go ahead, Ken.
Ken. I want to hear Ken's answer.
Ready. Ken's ready. Go for it.
My answer is it's been a family business for 3 generations. So I was kind of always in the storytelling space. I want to hear how Ken got into this.
Well, okay, now I'm on the spot. So actually, the first children's book I did, and it was with the actor Terry Crews, but it was before 2019. We did it. This was probably 1995 when we first did the book. And the reason we did the book, or the reason I did the book, was because my oldest son came home and he was talking about this TV program, and he started asking all these questions about Michael Jackson. And, starting as a dad, you're like frustrated. You're like, why do you want to know? And he's like, well, there's a contest on TV, and if you win, you get to be one of the characters. But there were no brown characters. And it just hit me right there, like, something that you take for granted. Your kids see things that you don't see, little subtle things. And so I was like, man, I want that same subtleness, but to hit everybody. So I wanted to do a book for my kids. So my boys would be the characters. This was the Come Find Me book. I wanted my boys to be the characters, but any other kid would read it and say, that's just us playing hide and seek. That's the game. And so that was the first book. It was a simple book, but Terry did this, amazing artwork. We were able to fast forward in 2019. We used augmented reality with the book. So you can put your phone over the picture, and then the picture will come alive on your phone as well as reading it. But that was kind of the beginning, because, sometimes when you push a message, people tend to back off. But when they don't really know the message is there, sometimes it slowly gets in there. And so I like to think that was the way I played football, right? I was an outside linebacker. I wasn't a direct hit you in the face, but I would come around the corner and sneak up on you. But I would try to, lay the boom. So that's kind of the same way I want to do it with the kids' books or any books. Usually there's a message behind it. It's a subtle message. You may have to dig a little bit, but hopefully one day, you wake up and you say, oh, you know what? Okay, I got it. I see that. Or you don't see it, but you're a better person because of it. And that's kind of the goal for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. And the piece about representation and seeing yourself in the story is really, really important. Absolutely.
It's becoming, more people becoming more aware of it. It's important because, like I said, it's a subtle thing that you don't really realize how subtle it is. That if you've never seen yourself as a doctor, or you've never seen yourself as whatever, then you don't start thinking I could ever be that. But all of a sudden, when you see it, you say, "Wow, maybe that's me," and then you start moving towards it. And so I always like to think, your vision can be given to you. It can be given to you by your parents. It can be given to you by society. It can be given to you by the things you read in your environment. But that's your vision, and we have to realize that's an important thing for people. So I want to back off and stop talking, and there you go. That's my answer.
That's great. Thank you, Ken.
Sure.
And Philippe, turning to you. Yeah, you're right. You're kind of in the family business. Say a little bit more though.
Well, I came to this through slightly different means, though inspired now that I have a little girl, about Ken's story about how our kids help us see things differently, and they certainly do that. But I being a kid myself, growing up with my grandfather, Jacques Cousteau, and his influence on me and on the world as an explorer and a pioneer. 77 years ago, he co-invented scuba diving and underwater cameras and documentaries, and really opened the world's eyes to the ocean. And that obviously had a big influence on me. So I was a product of someone sitting me down when I was little and telling me stories and inspiring me. And, though I never knew my father, he died 6 months before I was born. He left behind an extraordinary body of documentaries and films and work of his own right that I grew up with. And so that idea of storytelling, Leigh, you said it so well earlier when you talked about the importance of storytelling and how it's, one of the ways that we communicate. I mean, it truly is the language of learning. And, for me, storytelling has always been a means to an end, just like Ken. For our primary goal is, sustainability and trying to build a healthy, thriving world for everybody. And how we reach out to people and inspire everybody. There's actually a lot of similarities, which we'll go into now, in terms of looking at through the social justice lens and environmental justice, and how do we broaden the constituency of people that see themselves as environmental champions. And so for us, that is a big part of what we do, and it's storytelling is the means by which we do it, be it through television, be it through animated programs, or through books. And I love books, and I love literary, in particular, literary work, because it allows you to imagine yourself in a role and in doing something that I think is a little bit less flexible when you're looking at television. Kind of the characters are there, or as Ken showed that story, his kids are watching the show and there were no people of color in this program, in this story, and it was hard for them maybe to visualize themselves in that then. And so through a book, you can do that, and people can imagine themselves on these journeys. So I love books. I love story like that, written story. It's such a powerful platform to inspire people.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Ken.
Well, I just want to jump in. Like, I'm looking at your background, and you think about it, you look at the background and you say, man, that's a person scuba diving. And you see that person, and there's a story behind that. But if you're reading it in the book and you're talking about the blue ocean and you're talking about the gentle waves, now I put myself in that spot and I'm floating in that ocean, and that then becomes this whole world. And I know for me, as a little kid, not even a little kid, but I know a teacher, I just remember, I don't even remember the story that well, but I remember a teacher reading this book to me. And when they read it, you became immersed in it. It became your world, and you just, your imagination was all a part of it. So there's so many ways that stories are being told. We just, we just have to, hopefully give good stories out there.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Inspire good and hope and opportunity and compassion. Yeah. That's the goal.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that it's probably easier said than done, and you both make it look really easy. I mean, you've actually led us to a question that I wanted to get into with you both. I mean, about how we make this fun. I mean, Ken, one of your settings for some of your characters was a magic refrigerator, which, can I just say, I mean, who doesn't need a magic refrigerator in their life? And you mentioned that Come Find Me has this cool augmented reality feature, which is really interactive and modern and fun. And Philippe, in the Endangereds, you've got this cast of characters that's these protagonists. You've got an orangutan and a polar bear and a pangolin and a narwhal. So you both have really, again, you make it look easy, but I know that there has to have been an enormous amount of thought and care into how you make this fun. So I wonder if you can talk a little more, elaborate a bit more on how you find that sweet spot between education and excitement. How are you informing and inspiring and entertaining and sparking imagination all at the same time? How are you weaving those threads together?
I always kind of joke and say, I'm just writing up to my level. so it's not that hard, right? To me, I still watch cartoons. I mean, I think people are now seeing with Marvel and all this stuff, there are a lot of people that used to read comic books and cartoons. We live in a fantasy world, and I've always admired older people who stay young, because the reason they stay young is that they see life through the perspective of everything's an adventure. They always have that twinkle in their eye. And so that's the way I try to write, is to say, man, there's so many cool things that can happen, and just get excited about the simple things, and try not to, I mean, I've done it at times where you write and it comes across preachy, but to try to have it as a fun story that you think any kid, or at least for me, any kid would enjoy hearing that story. And usually, like I said, there's a personal attachment to it. I did my first book. It was the Come Find Me book. Then and my boys as a characters. Then I did a book when they were 12 and 14 called Brothers of the Storm. And in my mind, I wanted, a legacy for them to have books. But then it's like, how do you write a book so it's not just preachy? I usually find that one topic that I'm trying to work with, and then I'll create the story around it. That's usually the way I kind of go with it.
Mhm.
Yeah, same. It's definitely key to not be too preachy and not be too earnest. The nice thing about fiction is that, for us, when we're trying to convey these environmental stories and human stories, because they're related, of course, right? We talk about climate change or biodiversity collapse or, oceans, all the bad stuff out there. I don't need to review. We all know about it. It's affecting people as much as it affects nature. But for us, it's using fiction is a very, very important, because we're able to put those characters into these scenarios as opposed to talking about them. They live them. And, as we mentioned just a moment ago, that's very important for our readers to be able to then imagine themselves in those situations, and to build that empathy. And then when they see the characters solving problems, our goal is to build an agency in young people and recognize that when we come together, we can solve problems, and that there's hope and opportunity in the world, even though we face extraordinary threats. And in particular, in the case of the Endangereds, it's a band of a motley crew of endangered species: an orangutan, a polar bear, a pangolin, and a narwhal. And in the first book, 2 black-footed ferrets. And the idea that we wanted for this book was to bring together a very diverse group of characters, all with different backgrounds and different experiences. But one thing that brings them together, which I think is a universal theme these days, is the crisis facing them in their environment. Mm-hmm. And that is, an equalizer, because we are all humans, we are all animals, we all live on this planet. And as we see the impacts of the environment and devastation of the environment, it's affecting everybody. And so for us, we wanted to tell a story that wasn't preachy, wasn't earnest, it was fun and full of adventure, but really place these characters into these scenarios that were emblematic of some of the bigger environmental crises that we face, to try and help young people understand and make sense of what's going on in a way that was immersive through these characters, as opposed to, let me tell you about climate change. Instead, let's see how that's affecting these characters that you begin to care about, and really feel that emotional connection then to the issue itself is the goal.
And I think it's important that we as the writers realize no one book is going to change that person. No one book is going to make the difference. It's like, like planting seeds, right? Someone's planting seeds, someone's watering, someone's fertilizing, but you're doing your part. And so you don't have to do everything. Your little part is going to hopefully keep compiling with other parts. And then that person becomes that person who you expect them to be, or you want them to be. And so I think that's what we do, is that you realize, you don't take the weight of the world on your shoulders. You try to have fun with the book. You want to get your message across, but you realize that you can only do what you can do, and it's a part of a bigger picture. And hopefully, like you said, we get to meet each other and meet good people that are all trying to achieve the same things. And it's a cool way to do it.
Ken, it's such a great point. I always think about it as similar. I use the seed analogy as well, or chorus. I think about all of us are voices in a chorus working together. And the measure of someone is, not what they take for themselves, but what they give to others. And no matter who we are, a football player, a diver and kind of explorer, we all have a responsibility to, in our own way, to tell stories that help others, that inspire others, and uplift others, and become part of that chorus. Plant those seeds to make the world better. There's nobody can say that no matter what their career, no matter what they do, that they don't have story inside them, and they're everybody. That's one of the main things I tell people, is that you're a storyteller. You be it to your family around the dinner table. Maybe you have a massive audience of millions. It doesn't matter, but you're a storyteller, and you can tell story for good and inspire people.
Yeah, and you've both named so many just really compelling concepts here. This notion of responsibility that you've both named, and actually also so interesting for both of you that much of this came out of your families in different ways, right? But this is coming from some of the people that we're the closest to, from our families of origin, the families that we're raising, and how powerful that drive can be to do good in the world with the platforms that we have. I also too love this notion of the chorus, Philippe. In my private life, I sing with a choir, and there's this notion of stagger breathing, right? Which is that when you're singing a long phrase, you might run out of breath somewhere in the middle. And so when you do, you take a quick little catch breath, but you know that the person next to you is going to continue singing their note. So we can't, Ken, to your point, we can't do it alone. Sometimes we have to take our breath, but if we're lucky, we've got the person next to us to help carry that melody.
It's the only way we create lasting change, right? Is because it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, that's a lot of our work with young people, is very much focused on helping them recognize that the kind of change that we want to see in this world, and building a more compassionate world, a more inclusive, more healthy, a thriving world, is going to take time. All these kinds of changes take time. So yeah, you can take a quick breath, but you got to have someone next to you that keeps fighting and keeps singing. I love that analogy there. That's a great, I'm going to use that. That's great. I'll give you credit though.
Although you don't want me in a choir next to you, because my singing leaves somewhat to
I
be
believe
desired.
everybody can sing.
We can all sing. It just may not sound the same.
So I want to, there's so much more I want to dive into, but I do want to talk a little bit more about the mechanics before, because I want to talk a little bit about the how, and you've begun to do that already, the how of how you put these stories together. And I imagine you both touched on, we don't want to be preachy. Absolutely. Kids, young people, they are smart. They know when we're preaching at them, and it immediately turns you off, right? So I'm wondering if there have been times when you've had to kind of course correct, or how if you're about to cross that line from engagement over to finger wagging and preachiness. Have you seen that happen? Have you had to pull yourself back and course correct?
I've had books that I've finished, and you look at it, and then years later you read it, and you're like, what was I thinking? I should have did this. It happens, right? No one's perfect, but it's. I think, to me, like when I try to write something as a kid's book, I usually think of what emotion do I want them to feel afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how I base it. And it's like, at the end, it's like, okay, if you feel this afterwards, then I've done my job. It's hit or miss sometimes, but to me, that's the center point. Like the books of, it's called, Life in the Fridge, When Chocolate Milk Move In. That's a little preachy, but it's also, how do you talk about diversity with saying one side is right and one side is wrong? Use something that people are familiar with, chocolate milk, white milk, neither of them are bad people. You got the older boys in there who are, causing the rift between both sides. And so, you talk about it in a way. My goal is that hopefully, as I write, like I said, it's more emotional. I want the parents to sit down and read with their kids, even if it's the first time, because I think that's important. And I also want to write it, or I've tried to write it simple enough where if you're not a good reader, because I know that would, to me, that would hold me back, thinking, oh, I'm not a good reader. So I don't want to, I don't want to embarrass myself and read this to my kid. I want to try to write it simple enough that a dad or mom can sit down and read to their kids, because at the end of the day, the kids won't necessarily remember the story. They'll remember the story as it's attached to the emotion. This was my parent. I remember sitting in his lap or sitting in her lap. And I remember, the environment. And then I remember the story, all those things attached to the book. And that's part of, that's part of the journey of writing it and hopefully getting some feedback from it.
That is really powerful. There's that, I think it's Maya Angelou, right? Who said people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll remember how you made them feel. Yeah. How about you, Philippe? Any places where you've had to sort of
Oh,
revisit?
definitely.
Yeah.
For me, it's very much leaning on, a good team. For the Endangered side, an extraordinary co-author, Ashlan. And the Endangereds is a middle grade book. So it's, for 8 to 13, 14 years old. And so it's 300 plus pages, a lot more scope in there to cross that line one way or the other, kind of undersell or oversell.
Yep.
And I know, at different points we had different emphasis on and probably overdid it or underdid it here and there. And as Ken said, you look back on that stuff and, you can edit forever. At a certain point, you kind of got to be like, all right, we got to make this happen. But I do rely on my amazing wife, Ashlan, and, my mother and our executive director, Echo, and all the people that help kind of read through these things and give feedback on them has been important in our journey. But, for us, it's unfortunately an embarrassment of riches of environmental problems that we face out there. And so that's relatively easy. In the case of the Endangereds, the goal was to talk about how essentially the world is out of balance, and it is, and how do we restore that balance? In our lifetime, in 40 years, we have lost about a little more than half the world's biodiversity, and close to 65% of the world's wildlife is gone. My daughter's 2, I have another on the way. And I think to myself, kind of a world that we created for them, who gave us the right to diminish the world to such a degree. So we could have a big house, we could have fast cars, so we could, what? Were those a worthy trade-off to give this world to them so impoverished and diminished? And so that was an easy topic that we wanted to cover, like that the decline in biodiversity, endangered species loss, and et cetera, and then tell it through the lens and the story of a motley crew of endangered species that are rescued from problems, situations in the wild, either the illegal trade in endangered species or starvation in the Arctic for the polar bear and the killick, and then they're brought to a secret facility and they get more than human sentience, and they can fly planes and like animal James Bonds, they can go travel in all the world and do all these adventures. But at its core, it's really looking at this idea of balance, and then we're not just about problems. Then it's like, okay, what's the solution? Well, the solution is all of us coming together, working together from a variety of backgrounds and experiences and skill sets, and coming together to solve problems. And that in doing so, we can help solve problems. We can, help restore that balance. And so that's the hopeful piece. So we start with the problem, but we also really look at what kind of, to your question, Leigh, what kind of solution do we want? What kind of action do we want? And then let those characters live that solution and hopefully impart that idea of agency, that feeling at least of, oh, wow, there's hope and opportunity. I mean, I remember the details, but down the road, there is the opportunity if we come together to solve problems.
Yeah, and I think this notion of modeling that agency is really critical, and it kind of takes you to the next point, right? So, okay, great. My kids read the book. My kids absorbed the story. Maybe doesn't even know they're getting the lesson with the story, right? It's like mixing the peas in with the mashed potatoes sometimes.
Exactly.
Right. So they've enjoyed this. Then what? And so I wonder if you could both talk about how we create paths for kids and young adults to move from the words on the page to taking action, to making a change.
Well, for us, we've worked hard for 16 years, starting with Earth Echo, to build that infrastructure that is a leading global youth environmental organization, and we're about building that global movement to restore and protect our ocean planet. And so through specific, for example, the Endangereds, or my elementary book, Follow the Moon Home, about a little girl that rescues sea turtles with her community, comes together and does this. It's really about, okay, then here's Earth Echo. For the first Endangereds, we partnered with World Wildlife Fund. For the second Endangereds, we're partnering with Conservation International. And so at the back of the book, there's bios about the reality of these animals, what they're facing, information about how you can get engaged with Earth Echo, with WWF or CI, or so we went into it with a very specific plan of being like, okay, how do we then connect the dots for young people to say, here are some resources that you can engage with. Join us at Earth Echo, be part of our family, be part of this global community of young leaders around these issues. And there's a long period of resources and tools and experiences that we're going to provide for you if you want to join us on this journey going down into the future, to continue to equip you with the knowledge and the tools to help solve these problems. So we started with the knowledge and the tools piece at Earth Echo and building that over years. And then I started doing more books and documentaries and films, so that at least as it relates to young people, we do stuff that's targeted towards adults as well in the film space and documentaries, but at least it's related to young people. We have a clear pipeline to kind of point them towards. Now you're inspired, you feel like you have agency, we're here to support you on that journey.
Yeah, something very specific, a specific next step that they can take. Yeah, great.
And I think I'm not as specific, right? Mine is more plant seeds.
Yes.
And so hopefully, at the end, it's a subtle thing. Like I said, with the Come Find Me book, when I started writing it, and I was going around to people and I was telling them about the idea of the book, and they were like, "Oh, well, you should have, your boys coming from Africa and doing this and doing that." And I'm like, no. And it was frustrating because I just wanted people to say, this is doing something that all kids do. It's just my boys doing it. And so they would see themselves, but any other kid would see themselves. And something that's simple, a lot of people don't get, but that makes a big difference, right? So the goal is obviously, it's just that if you could plant that seed where they don't even recognize it at times. They just read it and say, oh, look, they're playing. Because I'm a big Twilight Zone fan. I used to watch Twilight Zone all the time. So misdirection, you give them something and they think it's this, but really you're teaching them that. That's kind of my idea, is like, how do you plant that seed? And then, as I said, I also write it a lot of times with the parents in mind, or some person, like I said, the teacher that read the book to me, someone in mind that takes the time to read it to the kid, so that they can, say, wow, okay, yeah, man, they did the voice of the character in the refrigerator, and I feel like I was in the refrigerator. That to me is the big thrill. And so, yeah, it's not necessarily steps. It's just planting the seed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and it feels really important. The younger the child, right? The more important it is to think about the total audience, as you're doing here, to think about the teacher, the parent, the caregiver, whoever that is, who's going to be delivering that message. So you actually have this opportunity, not only for the child to benefit from just being read to, right? Which we know is good for little kids. And not only to benefit from hearing the message, but to hear that message coming from this trusted grown-up. And then the grown-up benefits too. I mean, I will tell you, I've learned plenty of things from, the picture books I read to my kid when she was small. So I think you have this opportunity for a ripple effect that extends beyond the child themselves.
And I will say that, look, we're storytellers, whether you realize it or not. If I walk into a room and my shoulders are slumped over and I got kind of a sad look on my face, I'm telling a story. If I walk in, I got all this energy and you can see a twinkle in my eye. I'm telling a story. You're telling a story by the way you dress. You're telling a story about, the topic you like to talk about. We all tell stories. It's trying to pinpoint that story and then have everyone identify with that, so they can say, oh, I get it. With the nonprofit I work with, Touching Heart, you never think that you have to teach empathy, or you never think that you have to teach compassion. You think that should be automatic, but the reality is that it isn't automatic, and sometimes you do have to teach kids, or teach them how to identify what they're feeling here is the same as that person is feeling there. And the easiest way to do it a lot of times is through pictures and through stories. And so that's ultimately the goal.
Yeah. Right. And so it's about the change that we want to produce in the world. I'm curious to know whether, what you both think about, whether kids and young people are somehow better equipped today, or more likely to feel that sense of agency today, or less likely? I mean, yeah, I'm just curious to know how you think about that compared to, when we were each little, compared to, or just starting out in the world compared to now. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I think it's a little bit of both, right? Kids are hit with 1,000 different things, so it's hard to focus on any one thing. When you had a book, a lot of times you had to sit down and read the book, or you would go back and read the same book over and over again. But now you're hit with 1,000 different things all at once that are begging for your attention. And so it's good because kids can see that no matter how small they are, no matter how young they are, they're seeing other kids do some powerful and amazing things to change the world. And so that's inspiration. And they see that and they feel empowered that maybe I can do that as well. On the other hand, you only have so much time and so much of your attention, and now it's getting hit in 1,000 different ways, and it's hard to really focus on any one way. And so, I always kind of equate things to working out. It's like a treadmill where you think, well, I'm frozen because there's so many things that I'm there. And you think, well, at least I'm not moving. But in reality, you're slowly moving backwards, and the treadmill is slowly moving. So you have to actually make an effort to go forward. And that's, I think, is a responsibility of teachers, parents, the people around them. We as adults have a bigger responsibility to push that to our kids. And whereas it becomes easier to say, just go play your video game, go watch TV, just go do this and that. We also have to, in some ways, mold a little bit and say, okay, I'm gonna give you a vision, and here's how I'm gonna give you the vision. It's with this book about, and saving our environment, underwater adventures. I'm gonna give you a vision because the parents are the ones, or the teachers or schools or whatever, the first ones that give kids that vision, and it's up to us to try to mold them in the right way. Sorry, doing all these hand motions.
That's it's right. And now, listen, at the beginning of this journey, I love listening, Ken, to your experience and wisdom. As we're starting out as parents, but I agree with you. It's this idea of parenting, right? I mean, that's what parenting is, right? It's not just giving your kids a video game or send them off to watch television. It's like actively being involved and helping them be more a more positive and compassionate person, civically engaged in solving problems and building a better society. And and that's as we begin this journey, that's very much what we're about, and thinking begin a journey as parents, but having done education for a long time, it is this sense of how do we give tools and provide resources and plant seeds. That's a perfect analogy that Ken shared. How do we plant seeds and hope that people take those seeds? I think from the perspective of this generation, when I was in high school, there was maybe a recycling club. I was like, yeah. What we see now with young people, I do think demonstrates a degree of engagement and certainly awareness about issues that is much more sophisticated than it ever was. And that's the good news. There's a lot of bad news out there. And I always tell people, the good news is that we see a generation of young people that have more determination and optimism than I think any generation, at least related to environmental issues, but I think many others as well, than we've ever seen before. And part of that is social media. Part of that is the incredible connectedness that young people have. You see kids in high school that have friends in Burkina Faso and Brazil, and are aware of this kind of global community that we live in. That we weren't growing up. I wasn't in the same way, and I travel. And so I think in that sense, it's good. There is the dark side of the social media, and that, as Ken said, that there's 1,000 things coming to people, and particularly young people at any one time. And there's a lot of dark, seductive things out there too that are dangerous. We see that happening in many cases, I think, more to adults now actually than young people. I was reading an interesting satirical comment that we were all afraid the internet was going to break our kids, but in fact the internet has kind of broken adults. They have a much harder time sifting through the nonsense that's out there than young people do. And so I think that's also good news. And I think that we do see young people passing laws and collaborating and building movements and also connecting the dots. And that's also very important. I think that historically we've been very siloed in the environmental space, far too siloed. It has not been a nearly diverse enough movement as it should be. It has not been a movement that still is an issue, but it's not been a movement that's connected the dots between those on the front lines of things like climate change, which tend to be historically neglected communities, which tend to be lower income communities around the world. And those types of issues, there's a bit of a reckoning in the environmental movement right now that finally we've neglected that. But young people today are connecting the dots. And when we work with young people, they're asking, they want to be looking at climate change and environmental justice and social justice. And how does all this fit together? Those, I would say, are the two biggest topics right now for the young people that we work with. And they're recognizing that this idea of justice and equity, it is an environmental issue. The access to clean air and clean water are human justice issues. And so that's exciting for me too. Whereas in the past, we really looked at things, I feel like, much more siloed. Save the whales, stop the rainforest from being destroyed, things like that. And now young people are really thinking about how it all connects. And that's important, and how it relates to people and how it relates to social justice and the economy and security, health. And so from that perspective, I'm hopeful about this generation that's more switched on and engaged and aware of what's happening at a more sophisticated level than ever before.
Yeah, and that intersectionality actually, I think, applies to both of your kind of passions and bodies of work. I mean, you think about also, if we applied the principles of compassion and empathy to right, that applies in any sector. It certainly applies in environmental work. It applies in disability access work. It applies in community development work. I mean, there's so many places where those intersections can happen. And as you were talking too, I was reflecting on the forums for storytelling that young people have today that again, in my generation, we did not have TikTok, but that's but that, like, if we think about the brilliance and creativity of storytelling that happens in these tiny little snippets on TikTok, I mean, it's game changing. And so I think it might redefine how we think about storytelling for social change over the years, or maybe, like, given how fast things move, like the weeks to come, right? I mean, it changes. The evolution is so rapid here for the places to tell stories and to not only inform but change hearts and minds.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
This is where we just all look at each other now. Storytellers have no stories.
Well, I'm curious. I still have lots more questions for you.
Okay.
I'm curious though, if there are specific examples that come to your minds. Again, your work has influenced. You never know, right? You plant the seed, Ken. You throw a stone into the water, and you see that there are these ripples that get created. But it's hard to really know all the people that your work is touching. But are there examples of where you have seen your work, your storytelling make change for a young person in their lives and their perspectives?
I mean, to me, like, there's no immediate change, but, and hopefully I'm saying this, I guess, politically correct, but you would see a white parent giving their kid my book with my boys on the cover.
Yep.
And they're the main characters, and those kids are then going to read that book and enjoy the book, and they're not worried about black or white. They just see those kids. To me, that's the world. That is cool. And whether it's Japanese, Spanish, whoever, when they see the book and they realize those are my kids, and that opens up the doors and gives you a different perspective of that person that everybody else may have said that's a bad guy. You look at it and say, wow, he's doing the same thing that I do. Can't be a bad guy, because that would make me a bad guy. We're doing the same things. So to me, that is cool. Like, I haven't, these are kids' books. I would probably get, when I am close to 60, but when you get older and these kids who are now grown up, and they'll come back. And I've had a few come back and say, oh yeah, I remember reading your books when I was a kid. not that necessarily it changed their lives, but they say, oh, I remember reading the book. And then you look at that person, you realize that's a good person. You like to think I had something to do with that, and that to me is cool.
Yeah, well, just the memory, right? That the story stayed with them.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I mean, look, there's stories that stay with us, whether you realize it or not. And sometimes it was an impactful story, sometimes it was whatever, but there's some stories that stay in our head and they're stuck with it for whatever reason, and we act upon it. And so, hopefully, like I said, hopefully it's a good story. Good is, based on your definition, but hopefully it's a good story that will steer you in some direction. And just ultimately, I think at the end, with all of us, we just want the world and people to be a better place, and to see that there's, we only have this one world, we only have each other, and we need to take care of it, because we only have this until we go to other planets. But even if you go to other planets, you're going to still bring your junk with you. And that's the thing that always sticks with me. Even one of my adult books, it's no matter who you are, you're bringing that junk with you. So you have to make sure that the junk that you're bringing with you is some good stuff, as opposed to junk, bad things.
Yeah, no
We're
doubt.
always, that's such a great, I love it. Yeah, I listen, I wholeheartly agree. I think, it's hard to connect the dots directly on, when you have books and you put them out in the world. I can tell certainly stories from Earth Echo's work, but with respect to our books, but I do, know a lot of young people that I hear from that love the Endangereds, or kids over the last years that love Follow the Moon Home, and learn something from it. And certainly, science has proven that, particularly with respect to young people at elementary age, they may not know, memory starts to shift, right? Memory changes, the way our memory works. As our brains evolve. By the time we're 3, 4, 5, our memory works very differently than when we're little, and continues to evolve, through those early years. And oftentimes the kinds of things that we're exposed to when we're little, we may not, again, remember exactly why we love dogs, or exactly, why we hate cookies, but oftentimes that can be driven, connected back to experiences when we're little. And so, yeah, putting out the positive kinds of stories and the right kinds of stories about people coming together, and solving problems, and finding that compassion and empathy is to each other and to the planet is I think there's no question that has a powerful influence on young people and their development.
And just so look, there's no knock against books that have no messages whatsoever. Sometimes it's just fun.
Well, they're fun too. Yeah,
it's just fun. And I think that's, sometimes you got to laugh. I mean, I know I call up some of my friends. We talk about nothing. We just joke around for like 15 minutes and laugh, and it's okay. That's our release. Sometimes you need to read a book and just laugh, or have a good story. And it takes you it's not teaching you a lesson. It's not anything. It's just a good story. That's okay. But it's just, we just happen to have written books and stories that are, pushing people in a certain direction. But there's nothing wrong with some of the other stuff as well, because, like I said, they're fun. I read stuff that's just fun.
I agree that entertaining is important, but I will say that I think, the kinds of legacy that you left behind, Ken, and the people that write books that do have purpose, those are the things that last too, yeah. Right? And those are the things that people think about. Aesop's fables, there's a reason that they still exist, centuries later, because there were lessons and there were universal truths, things like that. So yes, it's good to be entertained, but if you can entertain and provide purpose, like Ken does with his books, and like we try and do, then I think that's even better.
Yeah, that gets you toward legacy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Well, I am curious to ask you both. I mean, you both obviously bring enormous passion. You bring incredible knowledge. You bring
Good.
lived experience,
Good looks is, you forgot that
good
one.
looks,
Yeah,
At least,
there you
at
go.
least, at least on Ken's side, yeah.
Yeah, on both our sides. There you
all of
go.
those things, right? But you know what you're writing about, you know why you're writing about it, but you also both have celebrity status. And so, and again, you've chosen to use your platforms in a way that can advance these messages and outcomes that you want to see in the world. But I'm just curious to hear what advice you would offer to authors who want to engage young readers in social change work, who don't have that name recognition and who might run up against the, is this going to be preachy? Who are you? Kind of a reaction. Any advice for those writers?
Well, one, I'll just say, look, just do it. I've been amazed. There've been books that have sat on my shelf for years. I mean, years and years and years. And then I'll pull it up and you read it and you're like, wow, I needed this. This is the right time. This is the perfect book for me. And so I say that to say, even if you sell one book, like a lot of times, we get in, we want to be the big, famous writer and all that stuff. I still want to be the big famous writer, but you never know that one book. If you're writing a book because you want to make a difference, you want to express a story, that one book may be for that one person who, out of all the people, one person bought your book, that book was for them. And if that's the reason you're writing it, then do it. Don't let it, I was listening to this sermon, one guy said, the riches, most all the money, all the whatever in the world, the greatest wealth in the world is in the cemetery. It's because it's potential. People have died not doing anything. And so do it. The first step is just to do it. And don't squash the theory. Because, you see parents and be like, all right, that's a kid will write a picture and the drawings, like a kid's drawing. Oh, that's not good. Throw it away. Squash the dream. Man, just try it. Have some fun. People come to me and I know I'm like, look, I'm not the best writer. I need editors. I need people. I got bald-headed editors. Just
Everybody
pulling their
needs
hair.
editors.
Yeah, they're just, like, oh God, here's another story. Oh, but the idea is you're doing something and you're taking a step, and that's with anything, I guess, in life, is that you gotta take a step and try it, and there is no failure. Even if you do it, you're doing what probably 80% of the people would talk about and say they wish they could, but would never do it. You are doing it. So I would just say, do it, just try it.
Yeah, the only failure is not trying. I totally agree. I can't really add anything to that. Do it, be true to yourself, go out there and do your best.
Yeah. I mean, being a celebrity, look, it's not all that it's cracked up to be, because you think you can rely on that you're a celebrity. You think everybody's going to look at it just because you're a celebrity. The good news is that with technology today, anyone can write a book and get it published. Anybody can do a lot of the things that years ago it would have been impossible to do. Mm-hmm. So, there's really no excuse to try it. You try it, you may like it, try it, you may not like it. You may find that you have a different path than the next person, but like I said, it is to do it. It's just to try.
Love it. I love it. Thank you. Before we go, I want to offer, what else have we not talked about that we should make sure to share with this broad 1455 audience today? Anything else?
It's a good question. I feel like, Leigh, you're such a great interviewer and making it such a fun conversation. Covered all the points that I'd hoped to make.
Yeah, I mean, look, I can. Yeah. Life is an adventure. Like I said, to me, the greatest thing that I would see is a child who looks at the world and see it with like such imagination and see all the possibilities, and you see a older person who sees the world the same way. And regardless of the age, they're almost the same. And that to me is exciting. It's like, I want to be that old person who gets a twinkle in the eye and gets up and excited about doing some of the simple things. To me, that is the greatest way. But in between that time, the world can can beat you down. And so you have to fight almost sometimes to keep that excitement about the world. And I think working with kids, writing kids books will help you. Having kids, it helps bring you back to the area of saying, man, you know what, the world is special. Let's not try to ruin it for our kids. Let's try to encourage them, try to make them happy. Lord knows, I like to think I was a good parent to my kids. They may tell you differently, but me and my wife, we did the best we could for kids. Know that your parents aren't perfect; they try, but just to enjoy life, because you only have a certain amount of time on this earth, and you might as well make the best of it.
Yeah, I agree. We have as much, I think, to learn from our kids as they have to learn from us. Sometimes more.
Yeah.
And that sense of opportunity and hope and optimism that is naturally ingrained. I see a 2-year-old running around the house, just like, and sees a ladybug, and stuff, and its eyes get big, and it's the most amazing thing she's ever seen. And it's reconnecting with that childlike wonder in all of us. I agree is key. It's a two-way street if we look at it right, and being able to work with young people is what keeps me optimistic and hopeful about the future.
All right, real quick, I know we run out of time. Here's my scuba diving story. I went, I think in Hawaii, you can scuba dive in a group. Mm-hmm. And so, right, I'm not that great of a swimmer, but I'm gonna challenge myself. I go do the little thing with the group and do the little test, and they take us out scuba diving. I get down and I see a turtle underwater, and I freak out. I'm sucking up so much oxygen. The guy came by and he swam, and he looked at my watch, the oxygen level, and he's like, you can see his eyes get big, and he's like, get up. And I ruined it for everybody because I sucked up all the oxygen. I mean, that's my scuba experience. But
well, listen, I did my first dive off Long Island Sound, proper dive. I mean, I've been swimming and, diving at the surface, et cetera, when I was little, but there was a storm, and it took me years before I saw a sea turtle. So I'm very jealous. You definitely check something off the bucket list, but if you ever want to get back out in the water, let me know. We can help with that.
Okay, yeah.
I would take him up on that offer if I were you, Ken. I might ask you for the same, Philippe.
This was during my young football crazy days. Now I've gotten older, and but you know what? In life, I got to practice what I preach. Life
exactly.
is an adventure.
The adventure.
Yeah.
I love your phrase. My father always said, adventure is where you lead a full life. So it's kind of a play on what you said just a moment ago. And listen, when I think about the ocean, 70% of our planet, diving is an opportunity to explore a whole new world. I highly recommend it. And yes, we're here to help anytime.
Okay. Look, we got you on tape. You said it.
I said it. I mean it. I'll stand by.
Awesome, man.
I can't wait to see the book that comes out of this one. Yeah. I will say, as you both were kind of sharing your reflections at the very end here, what really struck me is that, whether you're a parent or you have just ever loved a child, I think what we all have in common is that we want the world to be better for our kids, right? That we all want better for our kids than we have for ourselves. And the work that you both are doing is helping to make that happen. So I just really want to express my gratitude to you both for for preserving the planet, for bringing empathy and compassion to our children and youth, for all that you're doing to make that dream a reality of this world being better for the kids than what we grew up with. Thank you so much for that.
You are a great interviewer.
Oh, you can keep laying it on.
Seriously,
you are. I agree.
At the end of the interview, if you can make the person that you're interviewing feel good that they were a part of something, you've done your job. And it's like, I'm honored to be a part of this group, but you made it really easy just to have a natural flow. So thank you.
Oh man, this pleasure has been all mine. This is one of the most fun parts of my gig as executive director here. So thank you both so much for taking the time. I will say, for those who've been watching, I hope that you all have enjoyed this as well. And I will encourage you to check out 1455 Literary Arts at 1455litarts.org, so you can learn more about all the other amazing work that 1455 does. But Ken and Philippe, I can't thank you enough. I look forward to meeting you both in person one of these days.
Next time I'm in DC, I hope to do that. And I know, for one, I'm going to be, as a new father, I'm going to be buying my copy of Come Find Me immediately to
Done
share with
deal.
my little girl. So Ken, it was a real pleasure being on this with you. Leigh, as Ken said, wonderful interview. Thank you so much.
Thank
I really
you
enjoyed it.
both. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.